I grew up watching the Masters of the Universe cartoons as a kid, and somehow I never really outgrew the fantasy world of Eternia or the mighty He-Man. I mean, such is the charm of a character that's crafted as the perfect superhero with peak male physiology. Prince Adam's alter ego is a transformation into a 6'7" titan with a super-muscular build, and back in the day, this really defined masculinity for an entire generation. But have you ever wondered about the intricate details of this amazing physiology? What really powers He-Man into becoming such a powerful individual? And how does his anatomy work? With the new He-Man film doing the rounds, I thought this would be a great time to dive deep into his anatomical details, and that's why in this video you'll find everything that explains his ageless vigor and superhuman strength. It's gonna be a good one, so let's get right into it.
The time for talk is over.
The transformation into He-Man. This is maybe the most interesting detail about He-Man because he doesn't remain in this state constantly in most narratives. Prince Adam is the son of King Randor and Queen Marlena, but he also has a secret alter ego. When necessary, he can transform into He-Man by raising the Power Sword and calling upon the power of Castle Grayskull. In the classic Filmation series, we grew up watching Adam raise his sword and saying, "By the power of Grayskull,"
by the power of Grayskull,
before becoming He-Man. Whatever superpowers and anatomical features that we're talking about next are what follows the transformation after he turns into He-Man. Also, he doesn't just transform himself, he also makes his pet Cringer transform into the mighty Battle Cat as well. Whenever he uses the Power Sword to transform, he channels the ancient magic of Castle Grayskull that's carefully guarded and managed by the sorceress. A blinding flash of energy strikes his sword, surrounding him as his clothes change alongside his body, granting him all his superpowers. Once the work is done, which is usually handling some crisis situation fueled by the likes of Skeletor and his minions, he can just go right back to his original form as Prince Adam. Honestly, I loved how the new movie gave He-Man a transformation straight out of the animated world. However, while the movie follows the whole transformation story, there's also a major revelation by the end. We find out that the sword is merely a vessel for the power, and the real power lies within Adam, who even unleashes the powers of He-Man after his sword is destroyed by Skeletor. So basically, Prince Adam and He-Man are significantly different in the cartoons and comics, but the live-action version makes them almost the same person, except that Adam is unaware of his true potential initially. Access to the power of Grayskull without the sword. It's not just the live-action film that puts the real power in the individual instead of the weapon. If you take a look at Netflix's Revelation continuity, Adam can call on Grayskull's power even without holding the sword. However, the result isn't exactly like his earlier versions, and here he's rather unstable and primal. This is termed the Savage He-Man form, and we see it when Adam transforms without using the Power Sword during his confrontation with Skeletor after Skeletor achieves God mode. He-Man becomes nearly invincible as Skeletor's attacks do little damage, and he overpowers the evil lord with brute strength. Even his clothing changes, because here he's only dressed in a tiny animal skin bottom with a bare torso. It's a rather defining moment because it confirms that He-Man cannot be underestimated and he can even bypass the need for his sword. The transformation turns him into a savage, hulking caveman version of He-Man, and he's driven purely by instinct and rage. He's devoid of reason and nobility, which are usually guiding factors for the He-Man that we're familiar with. Eventually, the primal and savage form subsides after King Randor apologizes for being a bad father, and this triggers Adam's humanity, calming him down. I think the build-up for the events in the recently released live-action movie stems from this narrative, which proves that the sword is only a conduit rather than the source of his abilities.
I have the power!
Dimensional and portal-related power through the sword. We just discussed how the Power Sword is merely a conduit, but it does enable He-Man to perform some superhuman stunts. For instance, we've seen how the Power Sword is tied to dimensional travel and access to portals so that He-Man can counter interdimensional threats. In the episode titled Diamond Ray of Disappearance from the original cartoon, Skeletor discovers a jewel capable of sending who, or whatever it's aimed at, into another dimension. When King Randor, Queen Marlena, and Man-at-Arms are all sent to another dimension, The sorceress advises He-Man to destroy the jewel. The Sword of Power deflects the blast of the Diamond Ray, and even though he was about to be pulled into another dimension, He-Man manages to break it. The Sword of Power also helps him transport his loved ones back to Eternia, suggesting interdimensional capabilities. Additionally, in the episode The Taking of Grayskull, Skeletor uses the cosmic suction power of a dying neutron star to create a portal that transports Castle Grayskull and the sorceress into another dimension. But even when the Sword of Power goes missing, it magically returns to Adam's hands, and eventually he tracks down the castle and overpowers Skeletor. He also returns the castle to its original spot on Eternia, indirectly helped by the Sword of Power.
Cover your eyes! I'm turning on the lights in this dungeon!
How does his telepathic link with the sorceress work? I find this particular ability quite fascinating because of how helpful it's been in numerous crisis situations. He-Man is able to connect with the sorceress telepathically, and they both possess powerful telepathy skills. She can communicate with He-Man across great distances, sense his thoughts and emotions, and even project her image directly into his mind. In fact, she's even contacted He-Man across timelines. When He-Man traveled to the future, the sorceress continued to speak with him telepathically from across time, giving cryptic advice that he desperately needed. There have been so many instances where she telepathically summoned He-Man to Castle Grayskull during a surprise attack, or would send a message whenever required. Also, who could forget the time when the sorceress sent Teela to the future for a brief period because she sensed that He-Man was homesick? If you think about it, their telepathic bond is fundamental to their relationship, since it's the sorceress who's responsible for enabling Adam with the powers of He-Man. She remains his guiding force, which we also saw in the recently released live-action film. In that, she appeared in her bird avatar form and served as a key force in guiding Adam through the brutal reign of Skeletor. He's a powerhouse with insane physical strength and durability. As we already mentioned, one of the first things you notice about He-Man is his hulking presence and brute physical strength. He's characterized by his immense strength, but it does vary slightly depending on the adaptation. The original booklet that accompanied the first He-Man action figure describes him as so strong that he can open cracks in rocks with his fists. He's been marketed as the strongest man in the universe, and his first DC Comics appearance told us that this is true. He could trade punches with the mighty Superman, and there's even an episode in the original series where he throws all of Castle Grayskull back into place after it's transported to another dimension. But it's not just about his strength, because He-Man is also incredibly durable. He's withstood countless brutal attacks that were enough to take down other heroes, and in the 2002 series, He-Man is shown enduring the brunt of 2 large explosions, which he survives. Yes, there is an upper limit to how much he can endure before his superhuman strength and stamina are depleted, but the limit is set very, very high. Also, there's an interesting bit of trivia that many fans are unaware of. The chest piece on his armor is made of an Eternian mineral called cordite, and this significantly adds to his physical powers. He possesses superhuman speed and agility. As if his strength wasn't enough, He-Man is also freakishly fast and agile. You can imagine how that makes him a deadly fighter. He can leap across great distances, dodge attacks in the blink of an eye, and react with such speed that it outfoxes any enemy. In the 2002 series, we've seen He-Man and Battle Cat racing across Eternia, and that should tell you something about his speed. There are certain episodes of the original cartoon that show him swimming super fast, which isn't humanly possible, and he's also turned various battles against Skeletor in his favor because of his extreme speed. And if he's chasing somebody, that person isn't going to be outrunning him anytime soon. Does He-Man have Superman's super breath? Even though we can still watch the original cartoon all day, I have to admit that some of the powers that were given to He-Man in the show would appear silly to today's kids. One of those goofy powers was his super breath, which is actually very similar to that of Superman. He can use the full capacity of his lungs to generate a powerful gust of wind that can knock out most opponents. In this version, he can also transform into a human tornado, sometimes just by spinning his sword of power, and he's even been shown flying short distances. He-Man is a master swordsman. I mean, this one's a bit obvious. The Sword of Power is literally his primary weapon, so you can bet he's a master swordsman who can use a blade better than most. Also, it helps that his sword is nearly indestructible and has certain magical qualities like deflecting energy attacks. We've already mentioned the episode Diamond Ray of Disappearance, where He-Man is able to deflect the power of the jewel with his sword, and in some versions, the Sword of Power can even shoot energy beams. In case you're wondering about the sword's durability, it was strong enough to destroy Skeletor's staff in the 1987 film. Honestly, we see the Sword of Power being used to unleash his other abilities more than we see it used in sword fights, but the few instances we do see it are enough to prove that He-Man knows how to use a sword to good effect, even against the most powerful opponents.
Let the power return.
His mercy and moral strength is no less than a superpower. In the past, we've underestimated the quality of compassion in superheroes, but He-Man sets the record straight as one of the most ethical and moral superhuman beings. Firstly, he doesn't believe in killing his enemies and always offers them mercy. It takes heroic restraint to defeat enemies without being cruel, and cruelty is something we've never seen in He-Man. Secondly, his moral compass is so perfect that he would rather suffer than take the easy way out if it means doing something that isn't fair. He loves his friends, allies, and parents, and he even attempts to love his enemies, even though that doesn't always work out too well for him. I guess it's his big heart that convinces the sorceress that he's a worthy wielder for the Power Sword. In the 1987 movie, he offered Skeletor mercy after defeating him, and only knocks him into a pit after he still attacks He-Man with a hidden sword. It's the same in the recently released live-action film as well. Here, Adam is willing to let go of the past even after he loses his father because of Skeletor. He's looking to make peace, and he points out that he believes in fighting only when absolutely necessary. This is a quality that makes him more than just Eternia's strongest fighter, because such insane power would mean little without his restraint. After all, we know that great power comes with great responsibility. Does He-Man bleed, or does he feel pain? If you ask us what humanizes superheroes, we'd probably say it's their vulnerabilities. There's a reason Batman is one of the most popular superheroes of all time, even though he technically doesn't have any superpowers. As for He-Man, while his superpowers are unquestionable, we've realized he's not flawless. He feels pain, and he can be bogged down with a massive hit from a powerful enemy. However, even when he takes damage, it doesn't hinder his ability to fight, which probably indicates that he can fight through the pain like the true masculine figure that he is. But while he might be able to ignore the pain, he still gets injured and can bleed. You have to remember here that the original cartoon was made for children, and a psychologist was hired specifically to ensure that the violence was toned down. Of course, we don't see any blood there, but the 1987 live-action film shows He-Man with a gash on his upper chest during one of his early fights. Also, the newer adaptations like Netflix's Masters of the Universe Revelation tends to be more brutal and realistic in this regard. Is the Power Sword an energy conduit? We've already established that the Power Sword has some special abilities that it bestows upon He-Man. However, the recently released Masters of the Universe live-action film really shakes up that whole idea. You see, it's not surprising to see different versions and adaptations have their own take on the matter, but we really enjoyed the narrative suggested in the film. After Adam finds his Power Sword, he's able to use it as a signal to Eternia, and Teela comes to get him back home. Later, he uses the Power Sword to turn into the mighty He-Man, but once the sword's destroyed by Skeletor, he remembers how the words actually indicate that he has the real power. He regenerates the sword with his powers, and Skeletor gets the beating of a lifetime. In that case, the Power Sword is really an energy conduit, and we've seen this in Masters of the Universe Revelation as well, where He-Man uses the sword as a conduit to contain the explosion from the cracked orb of power inside Castle Grayskull.
By the power of Grayskull.
Can He-Man reproduce? You didn't think we'd skip this question for one of our Marvelous Anatomy videos, did you? We've always been curious about future generations of He-Men because it's never been indicated that he's immortal. As far as his reproductive abilities are concerned, I think it's fair to say that he's capable of reproducing normally. In his normal form, Prince Adam is the son of King Randor and Queen Marlena, and there's no reason he can't further the line. There's often romantic tension between He-Man and Teela, and I'd imagine he has a soft spot for her. When the time comes, it seems likely that He-Man will reproduce and further the family line, although it would be interesting to see if that child inherited his superhuman powers as well. He-Man is resistant to mind control. There have been several instances across the shows, movies, and comics where He-Man has shown remarkable mental strength. His willpower is second to none, and it's a comical contrast to Prince Adam. His mental resistance is such that it's nearly impossible to gain control of his mind, and we saw that determination in the 1987 movie when Skeletor captured and tortured him. Despite his best efforts, he failed to break He-Man because He-Man simply refuses to submit. It's a powerful mind that makes for a real superhero, and He-Man is the best example of that. Does the sword have healing and purifying powers? I know we don't talk about this enough, but healing is probably one of the greatest abilities the Power Sword has. In the modern continuity, He-Man can use the sword to cleanse corruption or restore people affected by evil magic, and this is nothing short of healing. In Masters of the Universe Revolution, we saw He-Man curing Castle Grayskull and Eternos' people from a deadly nanite infection before taking on Skeletor. In fact, in the final clash between the two, he even pierces Skeletor with his power sword and frees him of corruption, turning him back into Keldor. I'd say this is more powerful than a regular physical healing ability because the sword can nearly purify the most corrupt and evil individuals.
You may have been born Keldor, but you'll always choose to be Skeletor.
He-Man is a born leader. Prince Adam might not inspire a lot of faith in his leadership, but as He-Man, he's unstoppable. We've always seen him leading the forces of Eternia into battle. Even when he fights alongside veterans like Man-at-Arms, nobody questions his leadership, probably because he's the one who has an impact. This might not be a magical beam or a powerful punch, but it's still one of He-Man's biggest powers. Even in the new movie, we saw how he rallied around his allies when they didn't recognize his authority. There's something about his personality that commands respect and obedience, and not in a dictatorial kind of way.
Have the power!
Is He-Man immortal? What are his major weaknesses? As powerful as he may be, He-Man isn't immortal and can be killed. In fact, there's a DC Comics storyline where he's killed by Skeletor, who then takes his sword and removes his power from Grayskull. Of course, killing him is extremely difficult because his superhuman form can endure a shocking amount of damage. How often have we seen him take a massive beating and still get back onto his feet? Even in the Masters of the Universe movie, Jared Leto's Skeletor hands him quite a thrashing and destroys his sword before He-Man summons his true powers to defeat him. Also, as far as weaknesses are concerned, there are a few noticeable chinks in the armor. I'd say his most significant vulnerability is that he can revert back to his normal form as Prince Adam if he uses too much strength or suffers extreme damage. In this form, he's just as weak and mortal as the next random guy, and in one story arc, he was blasted by the Ramstone of Zalacia and struck by the snake god Serpos' tail, which transformed him back into Adam. So there is a limit to his strength and endurance, even though on most occasions it's enough to get him through the crisis. Another weakness that I feel can be exploited against him is his lack of deadly ranged weaponry. The power sword doesn't really work like Thor's hammer, and He-Man has to resort to close-ranged combat. His moral compass also becomes a weakness sometimes because he backs away from landing killing blows, offering his enemies the opportunity to strike again. Aside from these, there's been a few times where we see He-Man incapacitated by poison or sleep gas or stun beams, and while they're not strong enough to kill him, they can temporarily weaken him. I guess there's a reason why he mostly relies on his friends and allies for support, and this makes him more relatable as a superhero who's not entirely godlike.
I have the power!
There's no denying the fact that He-Man has a legacy that few other superheroes can match. It's been over 4 decades, and the craze behind him refuses to die down. The new movie might not have done wonders at the box office, but we thought it was a pretty solid effort and very entertaining. As He-Man continues to evolve, both in terms of story and physicality, I'm eager to find out what the future narratives turn him into. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of He-Man's unique anatomy, and also share your thoughts on the newly released film. If you enjoyed this video and want to support us, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you want to see more videos like this. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one.